Okay, let me just read your bio a sec, Jerry, just so we can start with that when we kind of chop this around a bit. So just a brief resume for Jerry Marzinsky. So Jerry is a retired licensed psychotherapist with over 35 years of experience working with and studying the thought process and the voices heard by psychotic and also criminally insane patients in some of the most violent psychiatric institutions in the nation. So Jerry was awarded the state of Arizona's Meritorious Service Award while working in the psychology department of a large state prison. He was also awarded the Pima College Apple Award for the teaching of abnormal psychology. Jerry has also held the position of second lieutenant in the Arizona Civil Air Patrol and is a licensed commercial pilot, a certified scuba diver, and a long-distance motorcycle rider. He's also served and assisted as a Scout Master. His formal academic training comprises a BA in psychology from Temple University, a master's degree in counselling from the University of Georgia, and 2 years of study in a PhD psychology program. He's also the co-author of An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, Breaking the Spell of the Ivory Tower. So there's not much you haven't done, Jerry, really, in this kind of space from that kind of bio, really. So it is an amazing read. I mean, when you sent that to me and I read it, I thought, wow, that is, it's quite a life, really. And I would imagine you've seen a lot of interesting things in that kind of journey that you've been on.
I have in a lot of different spheres.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes like our conversation so interesting because you're coming at something from your perspective with your experience, and obviously I'm coming at things from a completely different window, but with a very similar viewpoint, really, and focusing on the same things, which is what kind of makes, I guess, life so interesting, really, is that we all have these different lives, and those lives take us down a path of some type of description. And then we kind of pop out the other end, not really realizing what the journey we've been on and how things have led us to where they've led us to, really. But obviously, from my perspective, certainly connecting with Lorna Wilson, she's pretty instrumental in the work that we do. I met Lorna quite a long time ago now, really. She came on a kind of SRT training session, and we sort of connected and really kind of dovetailed in with the same understanding. And I know you know her quite favourably too, really. She's quite a character, to be fair, is Lorna, which is good. I know that she was quite keen to get yourself and Dr. Terence Palmer kind of together. And obviously, I'd been working with Terry from 2011 as a research program. So Terry believed basically voices, schizophrenia, that kind of thing, came from spiritual possession. And that was my experience from a mediumistic perspective. So he was looking for someone from a spiritual perspective, a medium, to connect with him and work on basically like a 10-year research project to basically prove that auditory voice hallucination or schizophrenia, as we kind of term it really, or hearing voices, is actually a spiritual problem and not a kind of psychotic problem or a psychiatric problem. Not in all cases, of course, but generally our kind of understanding was, and the clients that we worked with that were schizophrenic, was that this is spirit possession and we need to be able to understand how we identify it to start with, aside from other mental health problem, psychotic problem or something, or psychosis. And then when we do decide it is a spiritual problem, how do we actually clean the spiritual soul, if you like, clear the entities, clear the negativity, and bring them back to a kind of sovereign state was our understanding. And I guess that's kind of where you've come from, but a completely different path.
Yeah, what drove me was two things. I was when I was younger an adrenaline junkie. So, poking through the heads of psychotic patients was an exciting thing to do and dangerous. And the
Yeah.
second thing is I didn't trust authority as far as I could throw them. You know, I I didn't believe a lot of what they said, and that's what I hated about psychology. Going through undergraduate psychology, there was no way to verify anything that they were saying. It's like they'd throw book after book after book onto you and say, "Okay, here, believe this stuff," you know, and it's like you had no way to verify that kind of stuff. Especially when it came to clinical type stuff, uh, severe mental illness, schizophrenia. You were never going to get into a mental hospital or a state hospital or a mental health center or a private psychiatric hospital. They would not allow you in.
Yeah,
They'd
right.
have some kind of excuse. Um, they had risk management, and I've watched them. When new nurses were coming through the psychiatric unit, they'd tell these nurses, "Oh, don't look them in the eye. Don't look at them. Just ignore them because they might attack you. Don't you? And I'm like, oh, for crying out loud, what are you putting into these people's heads? It's I don't know. Like, it's
So
like,
do you think that's because they don't really understand where the problem comes from, the source of the problem, which we both agree is probably spiritual, or certainly my opinion is it's a spiritual source. And I guess if science slash psychology doesn't understand spirit, which they don't really identify with, then they can't
yes.
actually understand it's a spiritual problem. So we have to go down this, it's a chemical based problem from a mental perspective.
Well, you look at the evidence for that. Anybody who's gone to a psychiatrist, they say it's a chemical imbalance of the brain.
Yeah,
You should think that if it's a chemical imbalance, one of the first things they would do would take a baseline
yeah,
of where the chemicals of the brain are and which chemicals are out of balance or by how much. Any of you who've gone to a psychiatrist see that that never happens. What you do, you go in there, you tell them the symptoms, they'll give you some kind of diagnosis from their opinion. There's no there's no objective test for any of those diagnoses in the DSM. And there's almost 300 of them
yeah,
now. There's not one single test to verify even one of them. They're all subjective. They're all made up by a group of psychiatrists that meets once every 3 years, and they're mostly for billing and identifying groups of behaviors. So when you look at this, 303.10 or whatever they have, those are billing codes that they submit to the insurance companies. They're more worried about the billing than they are curing anybody because these things are just subjective descriptions. Like I said, not one objective test to verify even one of them.
yeah,
You,
right.
you, you got that. The second thing you got, you can see for yourself, any of you guys who've gone to a psychiatrist, you think they would need a baseline. You think they'd give you some tests. They're going to tell you, you ask them, well, where does your mental illness come from? They go, oh, yeah, it's a chemical imbalance of the brain. You think they'd give you some kind of test to see what chemicals are out of balance and by how much? No, they don't do that. They just give you a diagnosis and then they start on their, well, I think we'll start you with this drug or that drug and then increase it, decrease it, change around, add all those. It's all about drugs.
Yeah,
There is no objective test. They don't even know what the chemical balance of the brain should be.
of course, yeah.
That bull crap was made up by Eli Lilly back in the 60s when they came out with Prozac. They needed some explanation for how their antidepressant worked. So they just made one up. Oh yeah, it's a chemical imbalance of the brain. We see that the serotonin reuptake, if we can block that, people seem to feel better. It's bull. You know,
So do you think
those.
there's a case, Jerry, that because they didn't really understand it back in the day, and obviously psychiatrists move forward, and there's an awful lot of money involved now, it's now a money-based problem. So we can't go backwards and say we didn't really understand it. We do now. We actually think there's a spiritual problem that we need to discuss, talk about, and bring that to the table. Would you think it is literally psychiatry is so controlled by, the financial aspects of it that is the kind of part that's holding it back, really?
Well, there's two things. It's their ego. They're like, not all of them, but I'd say a great majority of them are very egotistical. They're into the power. They're into the control. They're into the, you know, controlling people and bossing and demanding. I mean, especially the ones in institutions. I mean, I've seen them lock people up for things that they shouldn't have never been locked up for.
Yeah.
And it's worse in Britain. I've heard horror stories about what they do in Britain,
Yeah,
locking people up because they don't like what they're talking about.
yeah, yeah. I mean, if you walk to an MD today, a medical doctor, and said, "I'm hearing voices," they would they'd probably section you within, 5 minutes, effectively. But they wouldn't
Yeah,
actually talk to you about what sort of voices, what are the conversations,
oh no,
you know.
there's no conversation.
Yeah,
It's just like you said. If somebody walks into a psychiatrist's office and says, "I'm hearing voices," a few more questions, and you get diagnosed. Well, you're paranoid schizophrenic, and we're
yeah,
going to start you on these major tranquilizers that with long-term use will actually destroy your brain
Yeah, they
and
fry your
destroy
brain.
your central nervous system.
Yeah.
Now, I also think they're afraid of these people because they don't understand what's going on with them, and that the assault rate upon psychiatrists, at least here in the US, is much higher than it is for almost any other kind of doctor.
Yeah, of course.
You know,
But then, of
it-
course, it would be because obviously behind the scenes, I guess both our view. I mean, this is what Terence Palmer, that was his kind of his remit really was he wanted to prove that behind the scenes there are these negative entities that sit in a different vibrational frequency that we don't see, and that they are connected to these people hearing voices and suicidal and driving the kind of whole negative agenda really in terms of behavior. And when we clear those entities, the behavior comes back to normal without any drugs. So that was what how Terry and I have been working for 10 years really to find a way, working with spirit guides, to actually clear these entities. And they are behind everything. So we believe that every single person that was suicidal or schizophrenic or self-harming had some sort of spiritual attachment driving that behavior.
I
And of
agree.
course, that is, which I know is hard to prove because we can't see these things, but of course,
Well,
mediums can. And that is the key, I guess, really.
well, that's why psychiatry and psychology stay out of that area because they can't see it, they can't feel it, they can't hear it, they can't measure it. So they go, well, what are we going to do if we can't see it, hear it, feel it, measure it, look at it? Well, it doesn't exist. Bull crap. Where I started with is starting. I started off working in probably the biggest psychiatric hospital on the planet. There were like 10,000 psychiatric patients when I
Right.
got there. So I never had any lack of schizophrenics to work with. And I didn't really enjoy working with them because they were so confusing. Back then, I had no idea what was going on with them, and nothing in undergraduate or graduate school ever prepared me for it.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
because they teach you these counseling theories that when you come to using those with schizophrenics, it's like shooting a BB rifle at a rhino's butt trying to get it to move off the road.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. You know, so it's when I first got there, I, I was asking people, the psych nurses, the psychiatrists, are going to what's going on with these people? What is schizophrenia? What's causing this? 95% of the time, I get this chemical imbalance nonsense. Oh yeah, it's a chemical balance in their brain, and they were all brainwashed to believe that going through school. You know? But like I said, after a while, I saw, hey, where's the baseline? Where's the measurement? What chemicals are they talking about? What neurotransmitters? There's like what 200 different neurotransmitters in the brain. You know, where's the measurement? It did not exist. I didn't
'Cause
know that
I
at the
guess that's
time.
'cause I kind of guess that's the interesting part, isn't it? When we look at it subjectively and from a kind of critical analysis perspective, when you start in these roles or these jobs as a psychiatrist, you're going to follow your training. But at some point, surely you're going to start to question the training and look at the patient and think, how can we do things differently? What are we not seeing? We can't keep going along with the same thing because, like you say, the representation isn't really right. And if there is no test then over time, generally, tests kind of change the adaptive qualities of what you're actually trying to do effectively.
You'd think they'd figure out at some point that what they're doing doesn't work
Yeah,
because you got
yeah,
you got more psychiatrists, more psychologists, and more psychiatric drugs on the planet than at any other time in human history. And population's getting worse. They're getting sicker. The number of schizophrenics is growing every year. It's not receding. These people aren't curing anything. They're basically treating symptoms and making a whole lot of money doing it.
yeah.
You know, I think what
Oh,
is it in the U.S. It's $7.4 billion a year on antidepressant drugs. This
fine.
is something that Mace could take care of in an hour,
Yeah, right.
permanently,
Yeah.
permanently. At a fraction of the price of what these people are doing. And
So,
there's awful side effects to all these drugs. They don't call these side effects for nothing. These are toxic effects of these poisonous drugs.
yeah, I was going to laugh when people talk about side effects. You talk about any drug and they say the side effect is, and you think, no, that is the effect. It's not a side effect. That's what it
Yeah,
does.
yeah. And a lot of these antidepressants, side effects, suicidal ideation,
Yeah, yeah,
it's right on there. how much further whacked out can you be? And then you got, like I said, 50,000 people in the US killing themselves every year. And Canada has got a voluntary, what do you call it, uh, killing scheme. So you
Well,
can
like
sign up for
euthanasia.
them for the medical profession to kill you over there.
Well,
If you're
euthanasia,
depressed,
basically.
yeah,
Right.
you go sign up and they'll kill you.
Right. Yeah, well, I guess there is probably a depopulation agenda that's going on behind the scenes, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. So Canada in a lot of ways is the same thing is happening to them as happening to you right now.
Yeah,
Only
right.
they're rebelling and they're they're breaking out. So you got the whole western section now contemplating becoming United States.
Yeah, right.
Now the
That's,
crown isn't going to like that very much.
no, that's a good thing.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good thing.
so from your perspective, obviously Mace is your version of things. So I guess your understanding is that there is spiritual possession is the actual problem behind hearing voices and schizophrenia and
Yeah,
self-harm. Is that your opinion?
well, there's two things. Is one thing is what Mace calls a negative identity, and this is more like mental programming.
Okay, yeah.
Like you get something happens to you when you're 7 years old. Your parents did something to you, and you come to the conclusion that because of that, you're a worthless individual. Okay, so that pain stays there for a long time until the ego shows up and goes, okay, you're not doing well with this. It's bothering you. You can't function real well. Let me handle this. So it throws it into the subconscious mind and it locks it down. Okay. So it's no longer consciously bothering you, but it's still alive. It's
Right.
still it's still running a program like a computer program in the background, or a computer virus in the background. You see the effects on the computer, but you don't see the actual virus, right? So that gets locked down there and it affects, what the person does, what they don't do, how they perceive things, how they feel. It's all operating in the background, but it's not subconsciously available. So what happens is that when somebody shows up that's very similar to the person who caused that trauma in the first place, that thing goes off.
Right.
Mace calls it a negative identity. And it tells the person to either attack that person or run from that person or avoid that person. And every time it triggers, it gets stronger until it starts taking over the person. Okay? But it's not you might consider it a negative identity or a personality trait, but it doesn't belong to the spirit of the individual. It belongs to the psyche. So
Right. Yeah.
it's not like a negative entity that that thinks. It's more like a
Almost like a thought form type thing that's been
yeah,
created, basically.
it's like a thought
Yeah.
form that's kind of like a what do you call it, a landmine.
Yeah.
Or so when somebody with that's similar to the person that caused the trauma shows up into that person's psychic sphere, that thing goes off like a landmine, boom, and it blows, right? And each time it blows it gets stronger. Now a negative entity is a whole different ballpark, right? Now what I've seen is that these negative entities will put thoughts into the thought stream of everybody. It's not just schizophrenics, but they do it a lot with schizophrenics, you know. And what's so sneaky about it, and I tested this myself one day. I mean, those thoughts sound just like the thousands of thoughts that go through your head on a normal day. For the most part, sometimes they're different, but for the most part, there's no, we are the voices and you're no good. It's nothing like that. It just sounds just like the thousands of other things that go through your head. Oh, I'm stupid. I'm no good. I'm da da da. And it's the same tone. So it's mixed in with thousands of other thoughts that go through your head on a normal day. And it sounds just like them. Okay? And one of the things these negative entities don't want you to realize is that they're putting these negative thoughts into your thought stream. And they try to hide that way. So virtually every negative thought you have about yourself or somebody else is put there by them. And
Yeah.
then there's a negative reaction and they feed off of the emotional loosh that that negative reaction produces. So for them, we're like cattle. You know, we eat food, we drink water, we produce energetic energy. They have to bring down the vibration of that energy to the point where they can consume it. And they got that knocked with schizophrenics because they're at a very low level and they're reactive to a lot of things. I mean, they're constantly at effect for whatever's going on. So when they go off, when they get irritated and anxious, like they're in a constant state of that, these things are feeding off of that negative emotion. So MACE itself, I've found, isn't as effective as I'd like with the voices. But one thing it has done and does do is it takes care of the trauma that these things feed off of. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
so
Because I
it'll
mean that's
go
the whole
in.
thing, isn't it? That is the whole thing, is that there has to be that negative trauma somewhere, and then most people kind of self-medicate with drugs, which of course changes the frequency, brings them down, and the whole thing becomes this loop, doesn't it, really? Which is what we kind of found as well.
Yeah, there's a number of ways they get in. You know, one big way is trauma. Another way is drugs, especially amphetamine. Man, amphetamine just opens up the spiritual field like, come on and get me.
Yeah, right.
And you look at the tons of amphetamine that's pouring out of South America and being traveled all over the world. I mean, this is it's a death sentence. Once that stuff, the prisoners called it the devil's drug. Once
Right.
that stuff's got you, those things move in. Another way is Ouija boards. I've
Yeah,
seen a
right.
lot of people get uh, infested with Ouija boards. They start playing with the Ouija boards and taking messages on the Ouija board, and then they start hearing that same thing in their head. They don't know what they're playing with. They think it's a toy. Those things should be outlawed. They shouldn't be sold as toys. They're dangerous. You know.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
that is the whole thing, isn't it? Because again, it's an occult product, a tool to speak to spirit, not something to be played with. But most people play with it, as you say, really not really understanding. And again, when I was talking to my spirit guide Chen, he said, from a spirit perspective, the positive guys will never connect with people playing with Ouija boards. It's only ever going to be the negative entities that reply, because the positive guys will stand back and think you don't know what you're doing, you shouldn't be using that, you shouldn't be playing with it. But the entities come straight in with, I'm your granny, I'm your father, I'm your mother, and obviously can then basically control that and obviously move that in a kind of constantly negative and deceptive way.
right. They're very deceptive and they're consummate liars. They lie about everything. You can't trust anything they say. you know, and 95% of what they say is negative, but they can pretend to be anybody. They can pretend to be your mother, your father, they can pretend to be Jesus Christ. You know, you can't trust anything they say, and they're constantly negative. So when I started working with these guys, nobody in that entire hospital was curious. I mean, and there were hundreds of staff there, hundreds. None of them were curious about what these voices were telling schizophrenics, except me. So after I couldn't get any answers from anybody, I started asking these guys, what are these voices telling you?
Yeah.
You know, and that got weird because they didn't want to talk about it. And then if you look at it, why should they? I mean, that's what got them into the hospital in the first place, talking
Of
about the
course.
voices. And the
Yeah.
voices, for the most part, are the ones that warned them. Say, you talk about us, they're going to lock you up into a loony bin.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that actually happens. you know. So there is no positive benefit for a schizophrenic to talk about their voices. They lose friends. They tell their friend, "Oh, I'm hearing this voice that's telling me to kill myself or whatever." The friends go, "Whoa, get away from this guy." So they tell their mother, their father, they drag them into the psychiatrist's office. The psychiatrist says, "Hey, your brain is broken. There's nothing you can do about it. You got to take these toxic drugs I'm selling you for a horrendous price for the rest of your life." And they make them feel like crap. They turn them into hollow zombies. You know? So
Yeah. I mean, I've
they,
been,
they,
well, I know you work there, but I mean, I've been to some of these units in the UK, and everyone's walking down the corridor with this kind of like they can't move their feet. It's like
mhm.
zombies walking around. And I remember walking in there thinking, wow, this is unbelievable because
They call it the Thorazine shuffle.
right,
That's
it
back
felt
in
like
my day. And
it's like
what
the film.
it's due to neurological damage, and they no longer have a normal gait. They drag their feet around.
Yeah, yeah. I thought it was like a film set. It looked like some sort of film set where these people are
It,
coming at you that are just
yeah,
shuffling
it
along.
is kind of, they look like zombies.
Yeah, it's
And
unbelievable.
and that's permanent neurological damage. That
Wow.
doesn't go away.
Yeah, right.
And I'm not even sure that half of these psychiatrists know that, you know,
Really? Right.
because I've never seen a psychiatrist in all the years I've worked on the front lines sit down and talk to the person about what the negative side effects and the dangerous effects of these drugs are. What they do is give them, oh yeah, your eyes are going to get blurry. You might not be able to focus for a while. Your mouth will get dry. There may be some sexual dysfunction. You're going to feel doped up for a while, but just hang in there. It'll pass after a couple of weeks. They don't tell them about the akinesia and the peripheral damage that's done and the neurological damage that's done and
Wow.
all the nasty side effects of those things. They don't even mention them. They just, oh, here, take this stuff. That's what we do for this. And you don't find them talking to these patients very much at all.
Yeah,
The
right.
at least in the institutions, they're even worse. Some of the private psychiatrists might spend some time talking to them, but in the institutions, it's like, what's going on with you? Oh, you're hearing voices. Okay, take this drug. I'll see you in a month. You
Yeah,
know,
right. So what is your kind of understanding of sort of going back in time to religion, exorcism, spirit possession? Because obviously in our world, these two things are intersecting, and spirit possession is the problem with people that are hearing voices, self-harming, hallucinating, suicidal. So that's kind of where we're looking from a spiritual perspective. So when you were in psychiatry and in these sorts of places, did you have an understanding around what exorcism was about in the past, and did that come into the conversation, or was it not really
Not for years.
considered? No.
Matter of fact, I didn't want to believe in demons. I didn't want to believe in, negative spirits, that kind of stuff. I wasn't a Bible thumper. I was quasi religious. I believed in Christ and God and that kind of stuff. But I didn't want to believe in demons. It took me probably close to 20 years before
Right.
things happened to me where I could no longer deny it.
Yeah,
You
right.
know, So what I was searching for is what are these voices? What do they do? How do they operate? What do they say? So it took me about a year, or maybe a year and a half to figure out how to talk to these people so they weren't threatened. Okay, they didn't feel threatened because part of my job was to turn them in.
Yeah,
You
of
know,
course. Yeah, right.
I'd police the psychiatric wards, and if anybody looked like they were getting uh, out of control, the only thing we knew to back then in the 70s when I was at that giant hospital was you drug them. That's all we
Yeah,
knew to do. Drug them or give them a shock treatment. And those things back in those days were almost like electrocuting somebody. The
yeah,
first one I saw, I almost fainted. And I got a strong stomach. I almost passed out.
right. So I mean,
So,
that is the cattle prods on the kind of the
yeah,
examples, basically. Yeah, right.
yeah. What happened? One of my colleagues called me one day and said, "Hey, there's psychiatrist Joe is given shock treatments, and he's demonstrating it for a group of students. At his unit, he said, "Come on over. We can get in that group and see what a shock treatment looks like," because I'd never seen one before.
Yeah,
I've
right.
I've heard of them, but I'd never seen them. So here's this Cuban psychiatrist standing around a bunch of students with in a gurney in the middle of them, and he's rattling away, telling them, okay, this is what's going on, and he pulls up this wire with these two square metal plates on it about this big. And he says, well, these are the electrodes. And they were huge. I mean, they were probably an inch and a half on each side, two of them
Right.
on the head. And then he starts putting this gel on the electrodes. And I ask him, well, what are you doing that for? He goes, well, if we didn't put this gel on to help conduct the electricity, it would actually burn the skin of
Right.
the
Yeah, of
patient.
course. Fry the skin. Yeah.
And I'm like,
Right.
yeah. And then he's going on and he's explaining things. And then finally he says, okay, have the nurses bring in the patient. So out of one of the side corridors comes two nurses escorting this thin, frail old lady, just frail. And she's just, looks like she's just barely getting by and they're holding her up. And she walks off to this gurney and she just gets in it like she knows the drill.
Yeah, right.
They've done this to her before a number of times because she just plopped on the gurney, and said, okay, here I am. And, they put these electrodes on her and then they start strapping her down. I mean, they put like two big, you know, uh, leather straps on her wrist and on her arms and on her legs. They strapped down every point of her so she couldn't move. And I'm going, well, ask the psychiatrist, well, why are they doing that? They said, well, if we didn't do that, as soon as we hit the electricity, she would convulse and she would break bones.
Wow.
And I'm like, what?
Unbelievable.
This is a treatment that breaks bones? And she's just a frail little old lady, and they had her strapped down tight. So then he whips out this giant needle. It's about this big around and it's about this long and it's full of this milky white liquid, and he sticks it in her arm and then he starts plunging it back and forth, and sucking blood into it. And I'm watching that and going, oh, what's he doing that for? He's mixing the blood with this milky white liquid. And I asked him, I said, what is that? That thing's a horse needle. I've never seen a bigger needle than that. I think you've got it out of a horse farm. He said, well, if we didn't inject this is a muscle relaxer. If we didn't inject this, she would break her bones also, even with the straps.
Wow.
So, so they injected this big giant needle and she's just laying there like this. And then he tells everybody, okay, get away from the gurney. I'm about to set the shock. And he turns the dials on this shock machine. And then he goes, okay, here we go. Get away from the gurney. And he hits the button on this thing, and she just starts convulsing like she's going to break those straps. I mean,
Wow.
it looked like she was going to just pull the whole table up with her. And she's this frail old lady. And I'm just like shocked, like, whoa, you know. And then I'm thinking, okay, how long is he going to do this? When's it going to stop? And it just seemed to go on forever, and I'm like, oh my God, and I'm like, whoa. And then finally he stops it. I'm like, oh God, thank God. And then I look at her and he's just prattling, he's talking, blah, 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 talking to all the students, answering questions. And I'm looking at this poor old lady and she's turning cyanotic. She's turning blue. She's dead. She's
Wow.
on her way out. And I go, hey, doctor, she's turning cyanotic. Do something. So he goes, oh, like as an afterthought, you know. And he had these two things where they put on your chest and shock your heart. So he had that ready. So apparently this has happened before. And he puts it on her chest and he shocks her and she jumps. And then her color starts coming back, and then finally she's back to normal color again. But it was a while before she could move. They were doing 3,000 of these things every year at
Wow.
this giant hospital I worked on. 3,000. And they
What
weren't
was
determined, a lot of times they weren't determined by psychiatrists, they were determined by attendants on the psych wards who were telling the psychiatrist, hey, this guy's getting out of hand and the medicine isn't holding him. I think he needs a shock treatment.
I was going
And
to ask, so what's the output of that when they've shocked someone? I guess it resets everything for the nervous system, and so does it actually resolve the problem, or is it just a case of
well, what I've seen is that it will, um, in a lot of cases, it'll be a temporary treatment for depression. So it looks like the depression disappears for a while. But with schizophrenics, apparently these voices don't like to be shocked. Right? So they would disappear for a few days or a week or a week and a half or two, but they'd
okay?
eventually come back, but they didn't like to be shocked. So um, what
So
I
what?
started playing with after a while was something called it was the Tesla violet ray, I believe, that administered electricity, or no, it wasn't that. It was a TENS unit. It was a TENS unit.
Oh, right, okay, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because some people were saying, hey, I'm using the TENS unit and the voices don't like it.
right.
So that's something you might think about, if you don't have some other way to get out. So, you know, The shock treatments didn't cure schizophrenia. It didn't do anything for it, you know. So the the longer I went, I started seeing these patterns. So we're talking about uh, what do they call it? Now there's a name for it. It's a operational definition.
Okay.
Okay. So what I started putting together was an operational definition of what these voices were. Once I figured out that I could talk to these guys, right? And the first one that popped up was these voices were consistently negative. They were derogatory, they were insulting, they were abusive, they were destructive, they were telling the person to kill himself. They were always negative. So I'm thinking, like, well, if they're hallucinations, why aren't they all over the place like regular hallucinations? What is holding them on this negative pattern? So this was the first trait that I saw that made me wonder whether psychiatry was full of crap. You know? So if they're running patterns, they can't
Yeah,
be auditory hallucinations like the psychiatric mafia insists they are.
yeah, because it's not random, is it? Of course.
No, it's not random anymore.
Yeah.
And the question was, what holds them? What holds these voices on a negative trajectory? How come they're not random, but they're consistently negative? First pattern I saw. Second pattern I saw was they were anti-religious. They did not like the patient going to church. They didn't like them praying. They didn't like them repeating the 23rd Psalm. They didn't like them reading the Bible. They didn't like them go to religious meetings. Why would a hallucination be anti-religious? You know, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember one guy came into my office one day. He was schizophrenic, and he said, "Oh, they attacked me last night, and I repeated the 23rd Psalm." And he said they reacted like worms thrown on a hot frying pan.
Yeah. Right.
So I went, "Well, ain't that interesting?" So I started passing out the 23rd Psalm to all my other schizophrenic patients.
Okay.
The voices hated it. They absolutely hated it.
Was that the
Um, but
point that you kind of realized it was probably a spiritual problem because of?
the question was, is why would they be anti-religious? You know, what are these things that they're anti-religious? So I started suspecting, that it was a spiritual problem at then, but I wasn't sure. The next thing I said, so these are all patterns, and I got 23 of them. Okay, I don't want to go through all of them. They're on my website at jerrymarzinsky.com under articles. Okay, but there's 23 of these things, and if again, I publish these all over the place. I send them out to people I talk to on interviews. This is the operational definition of these things. Okay, so this is the evidence that they exist. That they're not hallucinations, as the psychiatric mafia is insisting. Do you think any of them have ever looked at this? Not a single one that I know of. And I went to Grok and I went, hey Grok, tell me about Jerry Marzinsky. And here's this, oh yeah, very controversial. There's no double blind experiments to prove anything that he's saying.
Yeah. Right.
This, all this research horse crap. And I'm saying, go look for yourself. These are published on my website. Look at those of you who are working with schizophrenics, take a look. You'll see these same patterns. And if they're running
Yeah.
patterns, they can't be hallucinations as a psychiatric mafia insists. They're
Yeah.
just
Well,
making money off you.
I think that's what I find so interesting, really. Obviously, our work with myself and Terence is intersecting at this point with your work. We were seeing, or we then believe that there were demonic parasitic entities behind
Mhm.
the attachments that are driving this behavior. But trying to connect to psychiatry and have those conversations is impossible,
No,
really.
no,
But
no,
you
no
would
way.
think there would be somebody that would be interested enough to say, show us the efficacy of the work you've done, which we can. Show us the people that you've cleared and worked with and voices stop, which we can. And
Yeah,
Terry did like 1,000 cases. Well, we did over 1,000 cases that we documented, and he wrote that into his
no.
book. But
Yeah, they
again,
don't want to hear it. They don't
yeah,
want to hear it. They're making too much money.
yeah, that's
They
the
don't
whole
want
thing.
anything to interfere with that. And the drug companies are right behind them. So psychiatrists are the drug pushers for big pharma.
Yeah,
They
right.
don't want anything interfering. They don't want what I'm doing. They don't want what you're doing. You know,
Yeah.
to interfere with their income stream. And the third one I saw is what you just saw. These things are they're parasites. They're energetic parasites. They get the person upset, and then they drain their energy. And I saw that over and over again. I saw that for the first time when I was working at the state hospital. Um, that these these things, after the voices attacked them, the patient didn't have any energy.
Yeah. Fatigued. Yeah.
Yeah, they're totally wiped out.
Yeah.
And it got with some of them. One guy told me, he said he felt like he was digging ditches and out in the hot sun all day. That's how badly he was drained.
Yeah.
So I started passing out these. I started asking these people, um, how much energy do you have on a 1 to 10 scale before the voices attacked you, and how much energy do you have on a 1 to 10 scale afterward?
Often.
Okay, and I had a bunch of them. I don't know, I thought like 30 or 40 uh, did that, and then we ran an analysis of variance on it, and it was statistically significant. There was a significant drop in the energy level of these people after the voices had attacked them. So I'm like, okay, whatever these things are, they're parasites, and they're energetically draining their victims. And the patterns went on. I'll just briefly go through them real quick. They get louder after sunset. And when
Yeah.
the sun goes down, the schizophrenics feel much worse, and the voices get louder. They get loudest between 3 and 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
They get louder if ignored. They refuse to be ignored. I remember sitting in a psychiatrist's office once where the patient was telling the psychiatrist, the voices are driving me nuts, and he goes, "Well, just ignore them. They're hallucinations." You know, and the patient's like, so I called him back a week later, and I said, "Hey, remember me? I was in the psychiatrist's office with you when he told you to ignore the voices." I asked him, I said, "How'd that work for you?" He said, "It didn't work at all. They got louder."
Yeah.
So then I started asking other patients, "What happens when you try to ignore them?" The answer was consistent. They get louder. Okay, so we're talking about pattern after pattern after pattern after pattern. These aren't hallucinations. This isn't random stuff. This is the operational definition of what these entities are. They foster self-destructive behavior. They're always telling the person to do something that will get him in trouble,
Yeah.
or they're telling them to kill themselves or to hurt somebody else. you know so it's always destructive type behavior. They foster isolation. They tell the patient, "Oh, just get away from everybody and go lock yourself in your room and listen to us all day." That's the worst thing that the parents can do with a schizophrenic kid, is lock him up by himself, because then nothing is interfering with the voices. They
Yeah.
don't want any interference. They don't want anybody interfering. Parents automatically become enemies. Friends become enemies. Anybody who tries to help that person becomes an enemy, and they'll tell them to avoid them or to attack them. Um, they demand the attention of the victims. They won't be ignored. They maneuver for increased control over time. They're constantly trying to take more and more control, until they get them to the point where they actually go out and kill somebody. And these guys who are schizophrenic, they shoot somebody, and they're brought into court, and they say, "Hey, I don't remember doing this. That's not even in my memory." It's because they didn't do it. you
Yeah.
know
Spirit possession, basically.
right,
Yeah.
right. They gaslight. There was one fella that the voices convinced him that he had murdered somebody. Okay, and he was so confused he didn't know if he did or not. So he thought about going to the police station and asking, "Hey, did I murder anybody?" But then he went, "Well, if I do that, they're going to lock me up in the crazy house." On the other hand, since he didn't know, every time he heard a police siren or an ambulance with the siren, he would start wigging out. And the voices would say, "They're looking for you. They're looking for you.
Yeah.
They're
Right.
coming to get you." So that created a lot of tension and anxiety that they were feeding off of forever. It's like a catch 22. So some of them are very stupid, but some of them are so sly. It's freaking unbelievable. They're so cunning and so sly. They manipulate perception to the worst degree. It's like if the schizophrenic's walking down the street and some people start laughing on the corner somewhere, they'll tell them they're laughing at you. They're making fun of you. So they cause the person to misinterpret reality in the worst possible way. They have complete access to the schizophrenic's memory. They can go in there and pull up every rotten thing the person did and throw it in their face until they generate that negative emotional energy that they feed off of. They demand the victim don't tell anybody else about them. They're constantly saying, "Don't tell anybody. Don't speak to a, don't talk to anybody about the voices." Um, they're consummate liars. You can't believe anything they say. They lie consistently. So on my website, under you go to jerrymarzinsky.com and then go to articles. There's a program there called the "That's a Lie" program that was developed by Sherry Sweeney, the co-author of our book. She got rid of her voices by using that program alone.
Well, that's
Um,
interesting.
so once you understand that you can't believe anything that they say because they're consummate liars, and 95% of what they say is either warped or lies, if they can't get you to believe what they're saying, then they can't get you. You know, if you just, oh, you're liars, you like, I can't believe it, get out of here, you liars, you know. And she's got a whole retinue for how to do that. You might want to look it up, and it's free.
Yeah, that'd be really
So
interesting, actually. So
so
she was
take it.
schizophrenic, was she? And then contacted
Yes.
you.
Well,
Yeah.
you tell her that she'd go nuts. She said, "Well, I was just hearing
Your
voices, you know."
voices, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I was they were internal dialogue, you know, and that's what they sound like.
Yeah.
They sound like thoughts, only you can feel they're not your thoughts.
Yeah.
You know, they're
Well, I mean,
coming
that's
from
kind of my
somewhere else.
opinion, really, is that every negative thought we have isn't ours, it's coming in from an external source. Because as humans, we don't generally have negative thoughts, I don't think. And I kind of, the way we try and teach things is to maintain this spiritual sovereignty. So you
Right.
protect your thoughts, protect your energy, and you keep the negative aspect out of your field, basically.
Yeah,
But
I
of
look at it
course,
like the brain is a radio receiver,
yeah,
you know, and it's tuned to whatever frequency you're at. If you're a spiritual person, it's tuned to, you know, the negative entities aren't going to hit you as much. You know, if you're tuned down in the schizophrenic level, they're going to be constant.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, Manuel Swedenborg, a Christian mystic, lived 300 years ago. He said, none of your thoughts are your own. They either come from heaven or hell or somewhere in between.
yeah, right.
They come in from spirits, you know. So the voices are consummate liars. They consistently steer the person away from anything that might be joyful or fun. They don't want the person having fun. They don't want them to be peaceful and happy. They'll do whatever they can to disrupt it. These guys try to watch, you know, Monty Python or America's Funniest Videos. The voices are like, you get away from this stuff, you know, and drive them away from it.
And do you
They
think
don't
that's
want.
because their frequency then starts to come up? And of course, they're
Well, no,
living in.
I think it irritates their frequency. It's like static.
Right, okay.
Yeah, they don't want to hear it. They don't want
Yeah.
the person being happy. They can manipulate feeling without speaking. You know, you could just be sitting there and just minding your own business. All of a sudden, you get this heavy feeling come over you. You know, they do that. They don't have to speak to interfere. Uh, they short circuit reason. You know, they get the person to do stuff that's very unreasonable. Uh, if the person is bored, they move right in. You know, a schizophrenic being bored is the worst state of mind for them, you know, because these things will move right in. They try to pass themselves off as your thoughts. That's their
Right.
biggest trick because they sound just like your thoughts. There's no, you know, when they come, there's no, we are the voices. You know, no, it sounds just like any one of the thousands of other thoughts you have coming through your head all the time, which makes them so difficult to deal with. And some of the prisoners I had, they would ask these things. Who are you? What are you? Guess what the voices told them?
I'm you, probably.
That's right. We are
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
We are you.
Which is the key, of course.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what they said. We are you. And
Yeah,
selective forgetting, you know, I'd give these guys homework to do to fight back against the voices. They'd lose it or they'd forget to do it. So they can wipe the person's memory out. Um, they destroy any positive self-concept the person has. Um, they attempt to sway the person away from consensual reality. You know, like, hey, all this weird stuff is happening to you that isn't normal. They use confusion as a means of instilling negative suggestions. So they get the person confused, and then they give them a suggestion as to what to do. And that it's the same thing to hypnotists do. They cause confusion, and then they give them a suggestion, and they move in that direction. They're doing the same thing. Um, they're aversive to anything positive or beautiful. Um, Let me see. Any attempt to inform the kid? Oh, yeah. So they don't. When I was working doing psychiatric evaluations in emergency rooms, the last 10 years I was working for somebody else. I was trying to figure out, well, what information can I give these schizophrenic patients that would help them the most? Because I probably wouldn't see them again after I did the evaluation. Then you turn them over to the psychiatric
Mhm.
mafia and they drug them. So I'm like, what can I give these guys that will give them a glimmer of hope? And one of the things, well, they had to realize that these voices weren't who they were, that these were separate entities. They had to know that in order to progress anywhere. The second thing is that they're parasites. So giving them this information, if they went to a psychiatrist and they told the psychiatrist what I was telling them, I'd be in real hot water. So I had to be very careful with this
Well, I
because
guess, yeah, because I guess you're kind of sidestepping this whole thing, aren't you, really? Because you've got your perception of reality, which is your experience, and then you've got the psychiatric aspect, and those two are not together, really.
they're not together, and I
No.
couldn't let them mesh.
Yeah,
If
of
they
course.
meshed, there was friction,
Right.
you know.
So
But
is there quite a lot
but
of control then? Or, was there quite a lot of control of you in terms of what you could and couldn't say and how you could approach that?
well, I tried to keep under their radar, and I learned that at the state hospital when I was first working, because one of the patients that I was working with, he went to the psychiatrist and said, "Hey, this psych guy, he was asking me about my voices, and I don't like it. I got very very upset. I don't like him asking questions about the voices." The psychiatrist said, "Okay." Next morning, I got called to his office. He closed the door and he said, "You will not ask these patients about their voices.
Right.
They're hallucinations. And what you're doing is you're reinforcing the hallucinations and you're making them worse by asking questions about the voices." That happened twice.
Right. Yeah.
So I knew that there's no way I could let these people find out what I was doing.
What you were suspecting, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, that I couldn't do it. You know, I got in trouble the last couple of years I was working in the psychology department of a state prison, and I was, trying to figure out how do you get rid of these things. And I was having some success. It wasn't all the time. It was, periodically somebody with voices would completely recover by doing the opposite of what the voices were wanting them to do, right? And making them aware of some of this. So these patients were telling the psychiatrists, "Hey, I don't need these meds anymore. The voices are gone. They're not there anymore." And the psychiatrist is like, "Well, that doesn't compute for him. They once you're schizophrenic, you're always schizophrenic to the rest of your life. That's what they're taught." And all of a sudden, this guy's recovered. So one of these psychiatrists started asking, psychologist started asking, "Well, what happened? How'd that happen?" And you go, "Well, I was working with Jerry down there in the psych department, and we got rid of him." So apparently he went to the chief psychologist and said, "Hey, this guy's doing something weird down there." You know, and so they started an underground investigation kind of thing. So
Right.
the chief psychologist sent one of his stooges uh, down to question the patients that I was working with, trying to get them to tell him what we were doing in our sessions. What was so amazing about it is virtually all of them knew what he was up to, and they didn't tell him anything.
Right.
One of them said, "He's helping us, not like you, asshole." that that boy, he got pissed off then.
Because you would think, wouldn't you, they'd be interested to know what you were doing because if you're getting a successful outcome
It
for your
was the
perception,
opposite. It was the very opposite. I thought the same way you just said.
yeah,
Oh yeah, they'll be interested. I mean, these guys don't need to take medications anymore.
yeah,
They're under control. They're back to normal. They can go out and work. You think they'd be happy about that? Uh-uh. It was the opposite. The chief psychologist and his cohort, when they started interviewing these guys, they got more and more frantic. They're going, "He's doing something illegal. He's doing something he shouldn't do. He's doing something against departmental policy." Which technically it would have been, because I'm not going to go to the Department of Corrections and say, "Oh yeah, I'm doing these experiments. I'm trying to get rid of these voices, and it's working sometime."
But you would
That
think,
that's
wouldn't you,
that's not going to fly.
if you're having a positive outcome, they should be really, really interested.
They
That's the
should
part
be,
of,
but they
because,
weren't.
obviously in the American system, the insurance companies are paying the bill. So you would think they would be absolutely, really, really pleased to hear there's a method to clear this problem very quickly with your
Well,
method, our method, and
well, this
obviously,
is, well,
so,
I got a story about that too. This was in the state prison where that happened. Okay, so um, that's the devil's workshop. I mean, that place is just crawling with these entities. Virtually all those guys are infested to some degree. You could feel it when you walk through the gate.
yeah,
It's like I felt like a spaceman in a spacesuit going into that place. I was in it, but I wasn't of it. It's like being on Mars or something for me.
yeah,
So what they did, they found this one guy who had completely recovered, and they found that he had a valid MMPI, in his record, in his psych record. So the investigator psychology said, "Would you be willing to take another MMPI?" The guy said, "Yeah, sure, I'll take an MMPI." The prisoner said. So he took it. It was a valid profile when they graded it up, and his psychotic scale was down to normal. He was no psych. He was back to normal, and that's the most advanced psychological test that psychology has. So that drove
mm,
me even crazier, you know. Um, so they were at that point they were gunning for me. But let me see, what was the other one I was going to tell? Oh, I was working for a private psychiatric hospital and doing the same stuff. These people were coming out of there recovered or in better shape than they were, and the psychiatrist actually saw this. You know, so the supervisor actually saw it. So at that point, I had a fill of that, and I had left that that hospital. But the supervisor contacted me, and I said, "Listen, I don't want to come back, but what I'll do is I'll teach your chief or your head therapist what I know." And she goes, "Okay, that's a deal, but you'll have to come back as a volunteer." So I went through all the volunteer stuff again, which was almost like a job application, all the crap and shots and fingerprints and all that kind of crap. So then, before we started, uh, the psychiatrist said, "Hey, run this by risk management. They have a risk management system for the hospital." When they went up there and suggested it, the risk management people said, "No, why should we risk anything? You know, who knows? You could get sued for this." Boom, wiped out.
right.
So there goes your private sector part.
So
They
is that
don't.
the problem with the insurance companies? Because I would think as a normal person that the insurance companies are looking at ways they can obviously not pay. So if there's a method like your method, our method, that takes like an hour, 5, 10 minutes to clear someone, bring them back to kind of a normal lucid state, you would think the ongoing cost of medication for the rest of their life would be so phenomenal that the insurance companies would be looking for ways to
Well,
resolve
that's a point. Maybe we ought to go straight to the insurance companies and bypass psychiatry and
that.
administration in the hospitals, and show them that it works.
Yeah, because that would be the easy way, really, because of course it's going back to the money again. And I think that's what Terry was trying to do. Terry was trying to have conversations in the UK, certainly, with a guy called Dr. Alan Sanderson, who was the head of UK psychiatry back in the day. He retired a bit like yourself, and he actually said to Terry, now I actually see the real picture. I really understand that this is an entity problem, and these parasitic negative entities are what we have to deal with. And if
Yes.
you guys have got a way to resolve it and kind of resolve the problem without medication, then we have to explore this conversation. But obviously, we haven't really got there yet. So it's kind of, but it's almost like we're going the wrong way because to try to educate psychiatry isn't really going to work
No,
because
I, I don't. Yeah,
yeah,
I came to that conclusion a long time ago. I know three psychiatrists, maybe four, that understand, and they're not from the U.S. You know,
yeah, right,
one of them's from France. I think two of them from Romania, and then one from somewhere else in Europe. And they were part of an esoteric yogi group. They understood, you
yeah.
know, and they paid for me to go over to Romania and give a talk on this stuff. And they said, "Well, we want you to meet our psychiatrist." And I went, "I don't think that's a good idea." And they said, no, our psychiatrists are fine. And I said, I don't know. I'm a little nervous about that. Psychiatrists have been my arch enemies for decades, you
Yeah,
know,
right.
and they understood. So there's four on the planet that I know
Right.
understand,
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's
but
what.
they're not going to speak out.
No, that's the thing, I
They'll
guess.
get crushed. They'll get
Yeah.
crushed.
And I guess that is the problem, isn't it? I mean, our kind of version of doing things, really, we're looking at kind of trying to educate practitioners and teach practitioners the methods that we use to clear people, to bring them back to sovereignty. And the idea being that as that happens, it will be the kind of clients that tell their friends, and the whole thing is ground up rather than top down. So we get to
Yeah,
a point where we kind of educate people, really.
well, tell me a little bit about what you do, because Mace doesn't work real good about getting rid of the voices. It gets rid of their food really well. I mean, it's
Yeah,
matter
right.
of fact, there's two times where with another practitioner where the voices said, "I need energy. I need energy." After being
Oh,
done
that's
with Mace,
interesting.
they're crying for energy. And then I had one last week where the voice came out and said, "I need energy." And I asked it. I said, what right do you have to be well, first I told it leave, and I called it, in the name of Jesus Christ, and whatever else I could think of, leave. And it goes, I'm not leaving. And it said, you didn't ask me about uh, the legality. You didn't ask me about my legality. He said that twice, and I said, okay, what gives you the right to infest this guy? And the voice said one word, pornography.
Okay, that's interesting.
Just like that. But it was begging for energy too after I hit it, but
Yeah,
it didn't get
right.
rid of it. Now, sometimes, like I said, 25, 30% of the time, the voices will leave, but Mace doesn't do a real good job about getting rid of them by itself. So I'm
Yeah,
real
right.
interested to hear what you do to get rid of these things.
Yeah, so the way that we've been doing, so obviously working with Terry, I was a medium, so talking to my spirit guide Chen, basically, and I was doing what we called a psychic surgery, so hands-on. People would come to see me physically, and we'd have like a little shed in the back garden. I'd put my hands on, go into trance. My spirit guide Chen would come in, take over, talk to the patient, and then he would perform a surgical operation on the etheric field and clear and remove anything negative connected. So quite often when I started, people would actually start talking in voices to him, and he would have dialogue with demonic entities and would say, you don't have the right anymore. And they would normally say, well, I'm contracted, or they gave their permission away. So someone's done drugs or some type of thing in a hallucinogenic state, like you said, really with kind of the various hallucinogenic things. And in that state, this entity's projected itself or presented itself as something good, like Jesus Christ or Mary Magdalene or just general deity figures. And that person then gives them permission to connect with them. And of course, from that moment onwards, that entity now has spiritual permission to possess that person, basically, or to stay connected to their field, their etheric field. And that's
Repeat that again. I missed it. They they asked permission for
so yeah. So in that kind of
Jesus or a positive entity to
well,
allow these things to come in?
they're kind of masquerading again as a positive entity. They
Oh, okay.
pretend,
So they're telling
yeah,
them that, yeah,
yeah,
I've seen that over and over again.
yeah,
They say,
yeah.
yeah,
So
I'm Jesus Christ.
they're kind of masquerading as something good. Well,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever would be good for that person. So if that person's religious, it's Jesus. It could be some other
Until they
thing.
get their trust.
Yeah, and then they basically get permission. So these demonic entities would say to my guide Chen, I have permission and a contractual agreement to be connected and possessing this person. So we tried to work around that for quite a few years, and then obviously I met Terry and we started to look at how we could do that. And in the end, it was my spirit guide Chen that said, "Well, hang on a minute, this agreement has been given falsely because this entity is masquerading as something good, and that person's given their permission to be connected with it. But of course, it's a masquerading negative entity, generally some sort of demonic or parasitic entity. So that contract is null and void from a spiritual perspective. And this is where Chen then said, now we can go in as spiritual energies and disconnect these entities from people's fields and basically remove them. And that was when we started to do what we kind of called, well, we called it psychic surgery at the time, but Terry kind of named it spirit possession removal, basically. So we were removing these spiritual entities that were possessing people's field, And of course, we would then see the voices would stop immediately. So
Okay,
we were
so
kind of,
that would work for the ones that were deceived into believing that these things were something that they weren't. But what about, I mean, methamphetamine, that opens these guys up. I mean, it's people using methamphetamine, it's like opening the gates and telling the evil spirits, come and get me. I
yeah,
mean, it's like a shark smelling blood in the ocean,
yeah, and that's
or
kind of what,
severe trauma,
yeah, right. Because
or
that's what we would find is that most people, are self-medicating because they've been abused physically, sexually, emotionally. They've got trauma, and of course, the trauma is driving the self-medication, and the self-medication is then Chen said when he, from a spiritual perspective, would look at someone's field, they should see like a protected field, but it would be perforated all over the place with holes. And the holes allow these entities to come in and connect into that person's energy. And this is where they pull the energy back out of that person, which is that fatiguing, people drained, unable to kind of get off the bed and walk, that kind of thing. So again, this is where they're kind of connecting to people and just using them as a food source. And Chen said, what we see from our side are these demonic entities basically connected, overshadowing people inside their field, literally able to change their kind of perception, change what they see with their eyes, change what they hear. So when you talk,
like these patterns I'm telling you
so
about.
exactly what you
But
basically
but
said.
what do you do? Okay, so if they're pretending to be somebody else like Jesus Christ, and I've seen this a million times, where they say they're Jesus Christ and they buy it and then they hook them. Okay, that's one thing. But what about if it's trauma or drugs or channeling is another big one where they get in. Okay,
Yeah, so again, the way that we kind of deal with it, so Terry kind of and myself were obviously working with Chen basically over 10 years, so from 2011 to 2021, and we came up with this protocol basically that had like a 15 to 20 different what we called vibrations. So we go through this protocol of talking and working. So the spirit guides are doing the work. So we're not doing the work at all. The mediums are talking to the guides, but the guides are actually doing the work and they run through this list of things. So we're looking for portals in the field that need to be closed, detaching attachments, whether that be negative entities or discarnate spirit. So again, people that earthbounds effectively that could be there. They're looking
so
for
are
clear.
you kind of like an onlooker and here's this interaction between the patient and Chin
Well,
going
we
on and
basically
you're
don't
sitting there
connect.
watching it, or how's that work?
Yeah, that was the way that we used to do things. So I used to connect to the person's field, the client's field, and I would say to Terry what I could see. We would see attachments, we'd see entities, we'd see quite a lot of problems. But then, of course, we'd always be attacked ourselves. So I
Yeah,
was
I've
continually,
experienced that a number of times too.
yeah, I would be continually being attacked psychically, and things arriving in the bedroom at 3 in the morning and all this kind of stuff. So we realized it wasn't really going to work particularly well, and then we went to then the model that the medium would just talk to the spirit guide, and the spirit guide would go off and do the removal and clearing to bring that person back to what we call spiritual sovereignty. So they didn't have any negative vibration in their field. And Terry used to say, we're kind of like the spiritual paramedics. We go in, basically clear all of the negative frequencies and energies from someone's field, from the trauma, the abuse, curses, closed portals, remove entities, remove discarnate spirits. We would see negative parasitic energies on people as well, quite often, that would be cleared and removed. And then quite often we'd see occult symbology inside their etheric field. So they may have been doing occult things in previous lives or in this life. So all of these negative frequencies are cleared by the guide, and then it would bring them back to sovereignty. And in theory, voices should stop. They should wake up. Most people wake up feeling more energetic, no voices, no negative thoughts. But then we would kind of say they've got this window of opportunity, which is basically about a week, to change what they've been doing. Because if they do drugs and things, they go straight back to where they were before. So they perforate the field, and then these entities will connect in, and the whole thing just resumes really. But in that kind of week, if they change their thought process, stay away from drugs and try to live a kind of more positive life, I guess, then they can maintain that higher frequency, which pushes back this level of kind of negative control. So that's kind of what we came up with, really, myself and Terry. And then obviously Terry passed. So myself and Jono Webster, who's another psychic surgeon that lives just down the road from me, really, we kind of set up Spirit Release Academy, SRA, to teach the practitioners the methods that Terry and I kind of developed, really. So we teach that to practitioners now. So we have kind of hypnosis practitioners and mediums, spiritual mediums, and they come on a course. We basically teach them the methods of how, as a team of three, so we have a medium and what we call a facilitator, who's normally hypnosis type background, and then the medium spirit guide to train them to do this work and do this disconnection. And again, it works really well because, of course, the guides are doing the work, the medium's not being attacked at all because they're not connecting to the client's field at all. So the medium is just kind of almost like the intermediary, really, between the spirit guide and the session. And then we have the third person that is what we tend to call the facilitator that runs through the protocol, asking the questions, talking directly to the guides. So quite often the mediums, like myself, would be in full trance, and the facilitator, that could be you, would be actually running through the protocol, talking directly to the spirit guide and asking the spirit guide, what do they see? Where's this problem? Where's the point of interaction coming in, or the point of vulnerability? So the guide is telling the facilitator what's happened with the client. And quite often, we could kind of go back to sexual abuse at 5 years old that caused multiple personality disorder. So we've got multiple personalities in there. So the spirit guides can kind of pull all of this information out of the field, basically. And that was what was so groundbreaking about the way that Terry kind of came up with this method of, I mean, so he wrote a book called The Science of Spirit Possession that he was hoping that psychiatry would pick up and kind of use as the default template, but obviously it's not really the case as yet. There's
No.
still time,
So
of course.
so do you guys you all use the same spirit guide? Who was it, Chin?
So everyone, all the mediums use their own spirit guides. So each medium, so we've trained probably about 100 people now. So each medium that joins us, their spirit guide gets trained by the team on the other side, effectively, to do this work. So I mean, at some point, maybe you and I could connect and we could kind of go through like a little research project, and you can actually see this happening in the way that we do it and teach it. And maybe we could even, well, if you wanted to, we could like find clients that we could use as a
Well,
research
I'm in an interview. I'll catch you later. All right.
bit of research material to do that.
Yeah,
But
I'd like
yeah,
that. Matter of fact, there's a group of us who are, you know, we see the limitations of MACE and we're pushing the boundaries of that with with the entities themselves.
right,
So we're actually running the process on the entity and it's draining them. It's
brilliant.
significantly
Yeah.
weakening them, but it, it's that happens pretty consistently, but they don't leave.
Yeah. So maybe if
You
we
know,
connected our process with yours, those two things together would be really interesting to
yeah, that's
research
what
and
I was
document.
thinking. It's refer the people that I'll clean them as much as I can, and then um, ship them over to you for the final thing. As far as I
Yeah,
know,
that would be.
I don't have a chin.
We probably do. Just you haven't met him yet. But that would be really interesting actually as the method, because that's the one flaw in our process, Jerry, really, is that we can clean, the energy effectively, bring that person back to a higher vibration. But then it's the aftercare that becomes the problem. So a lot of people don't do the aftercare afterwards or don't know how to do the aftercare or, and
Well,
of course that then opens the vulnerability again.
see, with drugs, that's something they're going to have to deal with stuff like pornography. That's something they're going to have to do. But with regard to trauma, when we're done, that trauma's gone.
Yeah, brilliant.
All right. So it's in the subconscious. So it's not anything that they can access. And I think I told you a little bit about the process of how it gets into the subconscious, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So that's not accessible by normal means. Now, what does happen is John Mace found that human energy, moves from negative to positive, that the spirit is positive. It's positive energy, right? This thing becomes like a alternate personality, or we call it a negative identity. So it's operating as a program, like a computer virus by itself. It's not really conscious other than it's set to go off when somebody similar to the person who caused the trauma comes near it. Then it boom, then it blows. Okay. And the closer that person is to the person who caused the trauma, the bigger the explosion. So it's basically not sentient. like a computer virus is not sentient, but it's causing a lot of problems because it's a big blob of negative energy. It takes a lot of energy to um, keep that stuff caged up,
Yeah, right. So,
to
so have
keep
you
it confined.
have you heard of telepathic hypnosis? So one of the things Terry and I were working on before he passed away was what he called telepathic hypnosis. So the idea was that a medium, so myself primarily, would then connect to a client that could be schizophrenic or have all sorts of problems. And the idea is that we would put our conscious awareness into that person. So I would connect to them, and as soon as I'd been connected for a few moments, probably, I'd start to have their thoughts and their feelings. And I could say to Terry, they're feeling very angry. There's a lot of rage. There's a lot of negative thought. So trying to kind of connect telepathically to that person. And
I
what we
wouldn't
were,
do that with schizophrenics.
no, so what we were
Like that
trying,
just gives me the willies just thinking about it.
but the idea was that if we could find the problem, almost like as you talk about that negative identity and clear it, we could clear it for them and then pull ourselves back using telepathic hypnosis to basically reprogram that part and remove the negative.
And I think what had happened, you'd have one of those suckers crawl right up that link into your brain.
Well, that's the problem. That was the problem. So we did do
Wouldn't
that.
do
But there
that.
were,
What you might want to do is I can send you some information on MACE.
yeah,
You
that would
know,
be really cool,
and
actually.
I've been on the front lines of mental health for almost 50 years now, and I've never seen anything clear the vast number of psychological problems that MACE does. It has problems with what you're dealing with. You
Yeah,
know,
right.
like I
Yeah,
said, it's 25, 30% at best right now. We're looking for more for better. But with normal stuff, like the big common one is like you're worthless, you're no good, um, you can't succeed, you're stupid, you're crazy, that kind of stuff. Normal psychological problems. It'll clear in an hour. It's gone. It's not
yeah,
there
brilliant.
anymore, and they can feel it. It's like draining a battery. You can get a brand new car battery, charge it up full, but if you drain it down to nothing where there's no electricity in there,
Yeah,
that
right.
thing's a boat anchor. It's dead and you can't recharge it again. So that's what MACE does with these negative identities and this negative energy. Goes in there, it connects it with spirit, and then it drains the spirit drains it and turns that energy into positive potential. So when we're done, the person feels a lot more energetic,
Energetic.
and you can see the expression on their face. It's like they're happy, they're energetic, they're like, I can't believe it. It's almost like magic to a lot of them.
Yeah,
But like
right.
I said, it doesn't do a real good job with schizophrenia. It'll clear
Yeah,
the negative identity, it'll clear the trauma, it'll clear the trauma really well, but and starve that thing pretty well, but it won't get rid of it. So yeah, maybe we ought
yeah,
to get together on this and
yeah. Because effectively, the spirit guide should be able to clear and remove the entities, and then that person would be then totally clear and energetically protected, which would be really interesting, actually. And
yeah,
that was
so
the area.
it might clear that entity, but it probably wouldn't clear that negative identity because it's like a computer program.
Yeah,
It's kind of like going, okay, we'll reboot the computer, but then it comes up with
yeah. The same problem.
the
Yeah.
same problem. So yeah, I think it would be a good combination because where ours fails, yours succeeds.
Yeah, yeah, and we've got that's the gap that we have. The gap we have at the moment is that we can. So Terry, basically, we'd been working on this for 10 years effectively and came up with this protocol. And then we connected to a guy called Mike Williams, who basically was a soldier, an ex-British soldier. He had PTSD, but he'd been hearing voices for 20 years. So he was schizophrenic. He tried to commit suicide multiple times. He'd been sectioned. He tried every drug that you could try. He'd been through the whole system for 20 years, basically. So he contacted Terry and said, I'm happy to be a research, case, if you like, really. So Terry basically paid for him to come down to a kind of a weekend where we basically went through and we documented it. You can watch it on our YouTube channels and things. But we actually sat him down, talked to him about the voices that he could hear, and then we went through our process basically of connecting to the voices. And what we found was quite interesting. So he had entities with him that we cleared, but more importantly, he'd been a soldier in I think it was probably Yugoslavia back in the day before it changed names and things, but back in the Balkan War, effectively. And he'd been walking down a road and there'd been a huge explosion and lots of people had died. And him and his troop came round the corner and walked down this road. And then some of the earthbound spirits of the people that had just died connected to him. And those were the voices. He talked about this Samantha was the woman, and she said, one minute I was alive, the next minute I was dead with my children. And they basically connected to him, and she'd followed him for 20 years effectively. When we talked
Yeah,
to her energetically, we obviously moved her, asked the spirit guides to move her on. And as soon as that happened, Mike was voice free from that moment onwards. It took like an hour basically. And then the film crew went back to his house like weeks and weeks later to check that he was still voice free. And he was still voice free. So it was kind of the efficacy that Terry was looking for to document it on camera that literally, here's a guy, 20 years, schizophrenic, been on every medication tablet, and in a 1 hour session, he's back to normal. And of course, the big problem for Mike was he became really angry because he realized that why are these services and these methods not available? Because obviously he ruined his life. He had 20 years of no life, ruined his
yeah,
family, his children. And he said, how can I sit in a room with you two guys and in an hour have no voices? It's not, it shouldn't be feasible. And if it is, why is this not kind of broadcast effectively to more and more people?
they
So,
don't want it out there. That's why
yeah.
they're making too much money. Now, the ones that you pulled out of this person, this soldier, were they negative voices? Were they tormenting him? Were they making his life miserable, or were they just interfering with it?
Well, both. So he had one entity, one negative entity with him that was very, very negative, that was pulling his energy, fatiguing him, and doing sexual stuff and all sorts of other things. And then he had two or three voices. One of the main one he identified as Samantha, but they weren't negative. But he said the entity put them into his field to continually traumatize him. So they weren't particularly negative, but he could hear them and he was talking to them all day. So they weren't really negative, but they said they couldn't leave. That this entity had basically pushed them into the field,
Mm.
and they were stuck effectively.
I had one guy that was similar to that. This was a prisoner. He said he was. I asked him. I said, "When did the voices start?" And he said, "Well, I was riding my motorcycle down the road, and all of a sudden it happened." And I asked the entities. I said, if there was one voice. I said, "Oh, how did you get into this fella?" And he said, "Well, I was riding my motorcycle on the highway, and I got hit and killed." And
Okay.
the prisoner was riding his motorcycle in another lane, and he saw him riding, so he went and he jumped into him,
Yeah, right.
and he'd been with him for years.
Wow. So it's a very similar story, actually, effectively, that the trauma and death of someone then leads to, because we were talking about kind of operating theatres and hospitals, you think the same thing's happening there, probably, that,
Oh, it is.
you know,
In the emergency room, I had one
yeah,
patient. She was schizophrenic. She says, "I never saw so many negative spirits, no many in my life as I saw in that emergency room."
yeah, which makes sense because obviously from our view of things, Terry used to say, if you're a negative entity and you're looking for negative energy to assimilate as your kind of food, then you would be in a hospital because that's where people are in fear, people are dying, people are in pain, people are in
Yeah,
trauma. So that's where you would go to feed effectively. So, we used to say hospitals should have a kind of spiritual cleanup crew on a daily
yeah, yeah.
basis,
I
protecting,
agree. I couldn't
protecting the
agree.
surgeons, protecting the staff, protecting the nurses.
Yeah, the only place worst was the psych hospital and the prison.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
prison,
yeah,
the prison was taken over by these things. You could
yeah.
feel it as soon as you walked in there. It was like, oh, oh.
Well, that was interesting, really, because we were talking about, Terry and I were talking about doing a research project with prisoners in a prison, but we never got
They
to do
won't
it
let you
because,
in. They
no,
won't let you in. Go ahead and try. I never, ever, in almost 50 years of working out the, I never saw a real researcher on the front lines
yeah.
ever.
But
They
you would
won't let
think
them
they'd
in.
be in, they would think, you'd think now with sort of prison overcrowding and the problems of finance and money, they would be really interested for a research team to come in, free of charge, obviously, to do that research, you would think. And especially if it quietened down the prisoners and, brought them back to a less aggressive, anger-based state, effectively.
Well, first of all, they wouldn't believe you if you told them. And second of all, then you got they want to make it look a lot worse than it really is. Like, oh, you're in danger. We can't take the risk. your civilians, maybe you could sign a no harm contract or something. Say, okay, yeah,
Mm.
if I get beat up or something, I won't hold you liable. Maybe you could get away with it that way. Um,
Yeah, some sort of NDA or something. Well, we have written to prisons, but we haven't really opened the door yet, as such. So, but
even there was a while where I was the volunteer coordinator for the prisons. Okay, and this group of fire breathing, um, rigid fundamentalist Christians ran the prison, and they didn't want anybody coming in there except them. They didn't want any Muslim preachers. They didn't want any, uh, you know, what is it, Hindus. They didn't want any Buddhists. They didn't want any Mormons. They didn't want anybody in there except fundamentalist Christian people. So when I started letting some of these other guys in to handle the other aspects of the population, they went and complained to the warden,
right.
said, "Oh, we don't want these people in there." And then they go, "Okay, you're no longer the volunteer coordinator." I went, "Okay, fine."
Yeah, right. Because I mean, that's the thing. The way that we work, obviously, our work is remote as well, so we don't need to go into these places physically. We can actually have a prisoner identified as a research case that we could basically just connect to the energy, try to clear the field, try to clear the energetically, and then see what the kind of the feedback is effectively, which is well, in theory, that's the kind of great way that we're working. It doesn't have to be physical. All of the work that we do and the way that we work is completely remote.
You know where you might be able to do something similar to that is with probation. Talk to the probation officers. And it's these the probation people, they're already in the community. They're
Yeah,
just
right.
they're
Yeah.
just watching. Okay,
Oh,
so they
that's
got to
good.
check in with probation every once in a while to make sure they're not doing anything stupid. But that would probably be the best way to access. And a lot of those probationers are ex-prisoners, and a
Yeah,
lot of
sure.
them are some of them are schizophrenic. So go down to the probation office, and you know you have probation there.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, yeah, same thing. Yeah,
Okay, yeah,
yeah,
go down to the probation office. And I don't I don't know. I'd have a better chance of getting Mace in there than I think you do of getting psychic surgeon in there. It'll be good luck to you. But what you could do is get some of these testimonies, write to them and say, okay, hey, we got something that works here,
yeah,
you know, and send them the testimonies, or bring some people in there and talk to this probation supervisor personally,
yeah. That would
and
be a really
say,
good way to do things. Actually, give basically a presentation about how we work and what we do, and obviously Terry's work.
well, you probably want to like get some people to say, okay, uh, yeah, I'm bringing Joe Blow in with me, and I have a million others like him that I can bring in, but
Yeah,
I'm gonna let him tell you his story,
yeah. Well, the thing is,
especially.
we've actually got that on video. Obviously, the work we do with Mike is a video on YouTube that
Well,
basically.
they might do that, but they might go, oh yeah, they doctored it,
Okay, yeah,
because these correctional people aren't the most trusting in the world.
and yeah, understandably, I guess, really.
So you might, to kind of make an appointment with one and say, hey, we got something that works. We're willing to uh, try it out free, to take a look at it, let you see it. Especially with Mace. Mace would work wonders for those
Yeah,
people.
brilliant. Because have you found that, like, we've written to a lot of the same with PTSD, so a lot of the soldiers in the UK, we've written to every soldier-based charity, basically, Help for Heroes, all the big ones in the UK, to say we would like to offer our version of what we do as a research project to work with the most severe soldiers that would be interested to to get some help in the way that we do things. And every single time it's the same reply: we don't align with your work. You think we're
Yep,
offering to
yep.
do it for
I, I,
free.
I ran into the same thing with the VA here. I talked to one of the head nurses over at the VA and said, hey, listen, I'll come in and I'll show you this works.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, no,
No, no, it's
but they let Reiki in there.
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they let Reiki in, but Mace, what's Mace? I never heard of Mace. So, yeah, that's another Fruit Loop thing.
But the thing is,
You
like you
know,
say, if you can actually prove, like Terry did the efficacy work of 1,000 cases that were documented, so we all have all of the data from the work to prove that, of 1,000 cases, the efficacy was like 80%. So it should be a case of just give us two soldiers, let us work with them. we'll do our stuff remotely. We don't even need to sit and speak to them, and they can tell you how they feel after these sessions. So
Yeah,
you'd
and I
think it would be a
same
no-brainer, really.
yeah, same thing with Mace.
Yeah.
I tried the same thing. I said, listen, I'll let you watch it. I'll run it on you,
Yeah.
and nothing. So would you say your success rate is on the average person that comes to you?
So yeah, Terry did. Well, from that 1,000 cases we did, Terry reckoned it was about 80%. So 80% of the
Wow, that's
people,
pretty goddamn good.
yeah, would say
That's
basically,
much better than psychiatry. Much better. I mean, you just blow psychiatry out of the water.
yeah. Well, we've
You
actually
know
got,
what I can do is I can start bringing you around on interviews that I have, as a guest
yeah, perfect. That'd be great,
to kind
actually.
of spread the word that you're available, and maybe something will come through that.
That would be great, Jerry. Actually, that's a perfect way to do things. I think it's just trying to find a door, isn't it? When we get a door
Yeah, yeah,
open,
yeah. Trying to
you
find
know,
a door to get in there,
yeah.
you know.
Because
Um,
ultimately, what we're trying to do is help the people with the problem, and it doesn't matter what we do or what we say. If it works, it works, and that's where,
well, that's the problem. It works. They don't want something that works. They're making $11 billion a year selling toxic drugs that are poisoning people and dulling them down and not curing anything. They don't want anything that works.
yeah.
I don't think you're going to get through to the psychiatry or psychology in my lifetime.
No, we're
I'm
sort of
blasting
doing,
every single interview I do. I'm blasting the hell out of them.
yeah.
Revealing the truth, and it's like
But then I guess
uh,
it will probably work the other way because when the people with the problem hear about these alternative, choices, then when they try the alternative choices and they work and they're positive, then they promote them back through their
that's
own network.
that's what I'm looking at. It has to be a grassroots thing.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not going to come through psychiatry. It's not going to come through psychology. They got too much money. They got too much ego. They got too much educational garbage invested in this. They would have to change their psychology programs. They would have to look at spirit, which they've been repulsed to do. They won't even consider it. And what was it? 4 or 5, 6, 8 years of higher education, all the way up to the PhD program. Not once did they mention spirit.
which is weird, isn't
Not
it? Because
once.
you've got like the church and religion talks about spirit, and everyone's religious or aligned with a religion. So it's almost like society is schizophrenic. Because on one hand,
Well,
people will pray to a God they don't know and can't see, but then they won't align with a spirit that does other things or could do other things, and
yeah,
that animates us as well, of course.
you're right. It's a split right down the middle. It's like church and state.
Yeah,
You don't mix those two. It's like you don't mix psychology and psychiatry with any kind of spiritual healing. I mean, it's just the way things are set up. I think the only way it's really going to come about is, by the general population waking up
yeah,
and one
yeah,
person saying, "Hey, I went here and it helped. I'm free of this stuff."
yeah.
So I think we're going to have to do it that way through the masses and let them see
Well, that's
until
what our model is. I mean, that was Terry's dream really, was to train practitioners to do the work and just get as many people trained doing the work in every country across the world, which we're doing basically. And those people will obviously define the change because they work with people that've got problems, resolve the problems, and then of course, word of mouth will be the kind of method to disseminate the information, really, I think is the way that we're looking to do things.
and YouTube videos.
Yeah.
You guys have a YouTube channel?
Yes, we've got YouTube, Facebook. So we're very active on TikTok and we're creating reels that talk about and show, the efficacy of what we do. And there's quite a few reels we've dropped in to show the work we do with Mike. Mike talking about I'm voice free after 20 years. So we're making lots of reels and shorts that we're pushing out on all channels basically to try to get the information out to the general public that there is another way. And of course it's very, very cheap because,
Yeah, compared to psychiatry.
yeah, yeah. A session with one of our practitioners is like $150 on average. And if you're then voice free for $150, it's a
Yeah, you
no-brainer,
can't beat
really.
that.
Yeah. So it's not about the money. We don't,
Yeah, it's the
we're
same
not,
here. I charge 165, so it's not too much more than that. Where
yeah,
the other practitioners are charging a lot more, and like you said, it's not about the money.
yeah. Well, it's all about kind of trying to help humanity, really. I mean, the way we
Yeah,
do things,
yeah.
and My spirit guide Chen says there's no better job on the planet than clearing these negative entities because the vibration of the planet will come up, and as it
Yeah.
comes up, it pushes them off. So, the whole dictate in the way that we're working with these discarnate spiritual entities that are here in a positive way to try to make this change and kick this negative vibration out that controls all of our society, finance, politics,
Oh
everything
yeah.
is controlled by
Yeah.
these entities, basically. So removing these entities from this planet is the kind of
So where do you
dictate.
think they go after you get rid of them?
Well, what Chen's basically said is they go to different vibrational frequencies, basically. So they take them off this elective frequency, planet Earth, that we would call it, and they move them onto a very low vibrating place. So effectively, they're moved into a different dimensional frequency, but they can't come back here, which is the key thing.
Now, have you noticed that they have what do they call it? Echelons or rank?
They seem to do. Yep, they definitely do. So we kind of grade these entities that we see, or the spirit guides will grade them type 1, type 2, type 3. So for us, a type 1 is a gargoyle type entity that seems to sit on people's back, on the shoulder, whispering negative stuff, but they're very easy to clear and remove. But lots of people have them. And then for us, a type 2 would be a demonic entity that we would understand as that, really. And then a type 3 would be an ET, maybe like a reptilian or some other species of entity, and they're the bigger problem basically, but we don't really see that many of them particularly. So that's kind of our version of what we class. I mean, that again, that was what Terry graded things because we would quite often be removing these entities from people, and Terry would be talking to the spirit guide, Chen, and saying, "What is this thing?" And Chen said, "We don't even know. We can't even give you a name for it because you don't know what these things are called. They're coming from other it's a different species of entity that's negative, but they're not reptilian. They're not the things that you understand or the profile. But these things, like a mantis-like being and all sorts of other stuff. But he said there are thousands of these other entities that exist in different vibratory frequencies that live in the negative space, and they're basically what we're clearing and removing effectively. So in the
Hmm.
end, the kind of agreement was Terry would just class them as type 1, 2, or 3, and that's how we would document it. And that's how Terry would do the statistical analysis based on someone that was schizophrenic, self harming, and suicidal would probably have a grade 3 or a grade 2 entity, but probably not a grade 1. But people that just had negative thoughts, were struggling with voices, the kind of lower level issues, always had a grade 1 entity at least, but also probably discarnate spirits, maybe cursing in the field, maybe occult symbology. So there's a whole list of things that we would be looking to clear and remove.
Hmm.
But
Well, it looks like Mace and what you guys are doing would be a 1-2 punch.
yeah, I think if we could join the
Yeah.
two things together, it'd be really interesting to put up a
Yeah.
little
So
project
what
on.
I'll do is when I run into a dead end, have
Yeah,
clear
perfect.
clear as many out as I can. Um, I'll ship them over to you. See what you
Yeah,
can do.
that would be
And
brilliant,
then
actually. Yeah, I'm more than happy to
let me
do
know
that.
how it works out with each one I send you. Just send
Yeah, well,
me.
we like you say, if
Okay,
we
we
stay
cleared it.
connected, maybe you could, if it's your client, we can stay connected. You can send them to us. All I need really is their details, obviously confidentially, and then we can connect, do work through a session, and then maybe you can connect to the client and ask them how they feel. The voice is gone. We can kind of start to come up with like a little research project or something, which would be quite good.
Yeah. So just um, yeah, I'm not going to connect with the client again, but just write me and say, okay, we cleared this guy.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
That'd be
perfect.
enough.
Yeah, we can
Just
do that.
so some feedback.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, so when I run into a dead end, and when I
Yeah,
send them to you, the trauma will pretty much be gone.
perfect.
The,
Yeah,
the
that'd be
voice
brilliant.
the voice would be weak, because we beat the crap out of it, but it would not be gone. And I'll refer them to you, and you
Yeah, fabulous.
let me know how it goes, and write me back. Say, okay, we cleared this guy. I think between the two of us.
Yeah, that'd be great, Jerry. Actually, it'd be really good to because that's the part that we're kind of missing. So joining these two processes or kind of protocols together would be really, really interesting. Because if that gave us more or less 100% efficacy, that kind of is a step change, really, for the people that are suffering.
Yes, I know one MACE practitioner who's also a, what do you call it, a deliverance type person, but she only works with Christians. if they're not Christian, whatever she does doesn't work.
Right,
And
that's interesting.
that's, yeah, she, it doesn't work and she refuses to work with them. So, you know, I need something like you that works with everybody,
Yeah, exactly.
because
Yeah.
not everybody's you know, a born again Christian.
No. Yeah. Well, this is the thing, isn't it? I mean, from our perspective, it's just the energetic field, isn't it? We're all humans, so we have our field, and the guides can go in, see the problem, and clear it. So it should be as simple as that, really, from our perspective.
Yeah, and from our point, it's easy enough to get rid of these negative identities
Yeah,
and
brilliant.
that all that negative programming, which is a totally different area than what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's
You know,
something we haven't
yeah,
even looked at all, to be honest.
yeah, you can't get rid of that, the stuff that I'm getting rid of by doing what you're doing because it's programmed.
Yeah,
It's not an entity; it's a program.
maybe
So,
that's why Lorna connected us together. She obviously could see both sides of that picture, maybe.
well, maybe I remember her writing me, and I'm like, "Who's Andy Porter?" You know, like, okay, well, okay, if he wants to talk to me, I'll talk to anybody who will listen.
Yeah. Well, I think we're all on the same side, trying to do the same thing, aren't we?
Yeah,
Trying to
yeah.
get this. It doesn't matter. And people say to me, "Well, can you prove this and that?" So I don't need to. If it works, it works. Doesn't matter what I do. If I sit in my room and never even see or speak to a client, and they feel better, and their voices are gone, doesn't matter what I've done because
Right.
it's resolved their problem, and that's all we're actually here to
Yeah.
do.
Do you have a body of testimonials that you keep?
Yeah, so we got again pages and pages and pages of testimonials,
Okay,
and
good.
but of course the problem is, it's trying to get them to someone that's interested enough to read it to actually do anything. Because again, we kind of, well, like you feel like you're knocking on this door, but the door doesn't ever open generally, which
Yeah. Well, the other thing we could do is talk to some of your patients and see if they'd be willing to maybe some of the ones we work together on. See if
yeah, that
they'd
would
be
be really
willing to
good.
be videotaped.
That would be great, actually. That would be fantastic.
Because I got a handful, well, not a handful, but probably three people who have been schizophrenic and have come out of it and are willing to go on interviews and say, yeah, there's no doubt, you know,
Yeah,
from my perspective, one's an engineer, who's the other one? The other one is she's now a deliverance minister. And they're willing to go on and say, this is my story.
yeah, brilliant.
This is what I did, and these things are gone. These are entities. They're not hallucinations like psychiatry says.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Obviously, we're both looking again through a different window, but seeing the same thing. We're both seeing this entity problem behind the scenes that no one seems to want to talk about. I mean, in the spiritual realms that I'm in, it's all kind of love and light and positive and dance around and be happy. When we
Yeah.
start talking negative entities and demonic entities, everyone just runs away and nobody wants to
Yeah.
talk about
Same
it.
thing with the churches. They'll talk about God and Jesus and all that kind of stuff for till the tide goes out, but they don't want to talk about negative entities, and it's not Jesus and God that are causing these problems.
Yeah, yeah,
You
exactly.
know?
But I think as soon as we start realizing that, these entities are behind everything, all of the negative stuff in our societies, politics, money, finance, everything has
Yeah.
this other layer that we don't see, basically. And if we all kind of understand that, then that brings them into the front line effectively. Then we can deal with them. But I kind of feel like there is change happening. I think more people are talking about it. When obviously I got introduced to you through Lorna, it was like, wow, Jerry's on the same page, a different book, but the same page, and we're doing the same things. So we need to kind of push that information
Matter of
out.
fact, they're two different pieces.
Yeah,
We're trying to move into the area where you're at, but none of us that I know have a Chang or a Chin or whoever you got.
yeah, right. Yeah, Chen.
Chan.
Yeah, yeah, perfect. That's good.
All right, let's see what we can come up with.
Yeah, definitely. Let's
And,
yeah, keep
and
connected.
what I'll do is I'll contact. There's one gal I do a every Saturday, the first Saturday of the month, we do a podcast together, and we
Okay.
bring on different people. And since I already talked to you, I'll recommend that you come on with us. So it'd probably be either January or February. Let's see,
Yeah, that'd be
January.
perfect, Jerry. Perfect.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, January or February.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
great actually.
and I'll touch base with it. And if you could send me that movie of the person that was cleared,
Yeah, perfect. I'll do that. It's just
I'll
waiting for you to
post it.
finish that.
I'll post it on my website.
Oh, Pat, yeah, that'd be brilliant actually. Fabulous.
Yeah, and that way it'll help get you out there,
Yeah, I mean that is the key, isn't it? It's just trying to get the right people to see.
trying to get the right people. And
Yeah,
I know a lot of podcasters that I can contact and say, hey, would you be interested in hearing from a psychic surgeon?
yeah, that'd be quite cool actually. Because I mean that's the biggest problem, isn't it? It's trying to get to the right people. So we've sent probably hundreds of emails to, as you say, the kind of the vets really, and all other avenues. But most people, they're either worried about their own exposure or having a conversation like this, people are a bit frightened about, so they don't want to do it, or
Well,
the door's
all the people
closing.
I mean, I got hundreds of podcasters that have contacted me. Um, so this would be a new aspect. I could contact them and say, hey, would you be interested in,
Yeah,
us
that'd be great
bringing
actually.
on,
Perfect.
and I usually come on with them, and
That'd be, yeah,
then
fab. Yeah,
the three of us talk.
that would be great actually. That would be really good.
Okay, so um, if you can arrange to show parts of that video you were talking about, the kind
Yeah,
of like, okay, here's somebody in action here.
yeah. I mean, I could create like a reel basically of 2 minutes of the main
Yeah,
parts of that.
yeah, yeah.
Kind of shows the shows the starting point, and then as we work through the clearing, and then when because I mean, bless Mike, he sat there and just looked shocked and said, "I don't hear any voices." And that's why you're here, Mike. And we went and sat outside and had a coffee because he was, a bit shocked, really. And then obviously on camera, he's saying, "This is the first time in 20 years I'm voice
Yeah,
free."
that would be perfect. So I
Yeah,
had one like that. He'd been hearing voices for decades, and we finally got him to leave, and he almost fell out of his chair.
yeah, wow,
His first words out of his mouth is, "The silence is deafening."
wow, that's incredible, actually.
I'll
And you can
never
imagine
forget
this is
that.
like, the people that experience these things is life changing to get
Oh
rid of the
yeah,
voices.
and it's
And
constant.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously I'm a medium, so I talk to Chen, and I've had times, in the last 20 years when I was learning to do this, I was hearing voices, seeing demonic entities with people. They pop up behind them and show themselves to me, and I look and think, what was that? But when you can talk to them and you're having conversations with them, if you can't control it, then it is a terrible place to be. Whereas the only
yeah.
difference really between a medium and a schizophrenic is a medium can control the telepathy, whereas a schizophrenic has blown open the connection and it's just a two-way gate effectively they can't close. And that is the problem, really.
Well, I think I can help you out because I got a bunch of letters after my names, which don't mean much to
I saw
me.
your letters actually.
Yeah, but they mean something to other people. But to me, they're virtually, other than giving me the door.
Yeah, right.
Because
Yeah,
for some reason, having a bunch of letters after your name means, oh yeah, this guy knows what he's doing. And I know so many people that have letters after their names that don't know crap.
yeah.
And and that includes all the friggin' psychiatrists on the planet.
Yeah, well, that was part of the reason that Terry Palmer, or Terence Palmer, got a PhD. He said, if I've got a PhD, I can talk to them at their level. I can talk to academics and academia, and they'll need to listen to me. But they obviously didn't because they didn't like the conversation. But that was the whole reason he did a PhD was because he thought it would open the door for him to be able to have a kind of, intellectual conversation with academics about spirit possession. But
I never went that route. I always went, this has got to be a ground movement
yeah,
because these morons aren't going to listen to anything. Psychiatry isn't going to wake up in my lifetime.
no,
So we have to go after the people, the ground people,
yeah,
and then we're going to run into a lot of problems if they start losing business. Right now, they're not anywhere near close to losing business.
yeah, of course,
The matter you try to get an appointment with a psychiatrist, they're 3 months booked out.
yeah, right.
So they're not going to be worried about guys like us talking about this crazy stuff. They'll just go there, bunch of fruitcakes, and
Yeah, they can book another appointment.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
they're not going to be worried about us until they start losing business.
yeah, right.
Then they're going to come down on us with 2 feet.
Yeah, but by then it'll be too late, of course.
Yes, that's
That's
what I'm hoping.
Yeah, because that's my kind of directive, really. That I do this all day, every day, full time. We're clearing people, thousands of people, and obviously running the Spirit Release Academy, training the practitioners. So our kind of remit is this is what we're doing, and this is how it's going to be, basically. So
Well, how do those practitioners find themselves a Chan?
Well, they have so the mediums because it's a threesome really. There's a
Oh, okay.
medium, so the mediums come to the training. So we bring two different people, to two different types of people. The mediums are coming because they are spiritual mediums, and they've heard about what we're doing generally. And we need good mediums, not just someone who's only just started to talk to a spirit. We need people that actually understand how to protect themselves, and we teach them that there's. So we've got like a week-long training course basically that's got sort of 50
Wow.
hours of theory. So they've got to go through all the spiritual theory around protection and guides and working with guides and trance and that side of it. And then the facilitators are the people that would be like yourselves that are coming from a different place, not mediumistic, but they're the ones that are going to talk to the spirit guides basically and follow the protocol like by the letter, document what they kind of see, and then of course produce the report that goes back to the client. So we've got these kind of two very different people. You've got the spiritual
Well,
people.
how does how does the facilitator learn how to speak to the spirit guide?
So we've actually got a protocol. They just basically ask the questions. So they're talking to the guide, and the guide will be answering them in the same way that you and
Oh,
I are.
through the patient.
Yes, well, not through the patient. So we don't connect to the client at all. So the spirit guide is connecting to the client to do the clearing, but the medium is just the medium's talking to the spirit guide and talking to the facilitator. So it'd be like you and me talking. If I was the medium, and I had Chen in now in full trance, you'd be talking to Chen and
Oh, okay.
you'd be going through the protocol asking the questions. Does this person have any entities connected? And Chen would say, yes, they have two type ones. So you would kind of document two type ones and then move on to the
Yeah.
next question.
Yeah. See, I could see where the psychiatry and psychology would have a hard time of that.
Yeah, like I'm sure they could. But then if you actually look at the efficacy of the work, that this is the bit that we need to float effectively, that it
Well,
works. So
yeah, it works, but like Simon and Garfunkel says, a man sees what he wants to see and disregards the rest.
yeah, exactly. And that's kind of, that was Terry's problem. Terry spent 10 years trying to educate UK psychiatry. He went around the world giving presentations to psychiatrists.
Beating his head against the rocks.
Yeah, what he was really, which was,
Did he
that,
get in? Did he get anywhere?
no, basically. All
Yeah,
he did
that's
do,
what.
so he wrote this book basically, which is called, I don't know if you can see it properly, The Science of Spirit Possession.
Uh-huh.
This is the kind of book he wrote, and this was basically it's kind of written in very academic speak for psychiatry. So the idea was that he was hoping that that would be taught to psychiatrists in college. This is the problem, this is how we kind of treat that, and it's the science around it, not just the woo-woo really, but obviously, that book
They're
really,
not ready. They're not ready for it.
no, not yet. Maybe they will be one day.
Well,
If we
one
do our
day,
work
the
properly,
more people we wake up, the closer they'll come.
yeah, and that is our job, I think. That's kind of how I see
Yeah,
life, really, is that we
I
just
agree.
continue turning the wheel and eventually that snowball will start to roll down the hill on its own, really, which is
And
the
how many people do you see in an average day?
so each practitioner obviously does their own work effectively, the ones that we've trained. But in our case, we're probably doing 10 to 15 clearings a day, I suppose.
A day?
Yeah, yeah. So it's fast, obviously, because I've been doing it now for 20 years. So it's kind of a very fast process. And obviously
Wow, wow.
the spirit guides are doing the work. So Chen's already done the work. So quite often people will email us and say, my appointment was in the morning, and last night before the appointment, I already felt clear. Voices had stopped. I felt different. I knew that I'd been worked on before your report even came in, effectively. So the guides are working fast behind the scenes to do this work, which
Wow.
yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot going on really from that perspective, and also trying to obviously train people. There's a lot of appetite now because we're pushing things out on social media. There's an awful lot of money being spent behind the scenes to advertise the work that we're doing and how people can do this, and the right sorts of people that are being kind of drawn to us really from a kind of Spirit Release Academy
Yeah, I'm
perspective.
running the same thing. I'm getting a lot of people that are contacting me and asking, well, how do I become a MACE practitioner?
Brilliant. That's yeah,
It's this last 2 months has been like constant.
yeah,
I
fantastic.
think I must have referred 15, 20 people to training.
Yeah, right. How long does the well training take? Is that like a week?
It takes a lot longer than with yours.
Yeah, right.
They have a big thing to um, all these manuals and stuff you have to read. Um, I'd say usually it takes about 6 months,
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Which is
and
good.
you
Yeah.
could
So
probably finish it closer if you had the clients because what they do is you make videotapes of you using the protocol,
no, okay.
and then they give you feedback back, and then they have like an ongoing in-service kind of thing that goes like once a month.
Yeah, right, okay. I mean, interesting comparing the two ways that we approach things and the way you guys approach things and seeing if there is kind of, the way that we can connect them together. Because potentially we could connect our practitioners to your practitioners and bring those two things together in different ways, maybe, which would be quite interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, what 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 the chief trainer for Mace says is that all of these things are negative identities. You know, all of them are the program. I don't
Yeah,
believe that. And I
yeah,
told her, I said, you're never going to convince me of that.
yeah, right.
So what I did is I sent her a couple of schizophrenics, and I said, "You think these are negative identities here? Deal with
Yeah,
these couple of guys, and let me know how you do." She
yeah,
didn't do well,
no. I
so
think,
it,
uh,
it what you're saying has to be done. That negative identity, that trauma stuff has to be cleared. Otherwise, they will keep feeding on it.
yeah, yeah,
And once we clear it, it's permanently gone. It's not there anymore. Like I said, it's like draining a battery. It's not
yeah,
going to come back. That food is no longer there for them to feed.
yeah. I
You know,
mean, it's,
so it's like that. That's the groundwork that has to be done before we turn them over to you.
yeah, that'd be really cool. Brilliant, actually. Be fascinating to actually, document those cases and move that forward.
And we'll see if we can't figure out a way to do that.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
I mean, it should be very easy, really, because like you say, all I need from your perspective is literally your client details. We'll do the remote session. I'll just reply to you and say, this is what we found, and we're done. So that can be done very quickly.
or you can do this remotely.
Yeah, yeah. So you don't need because the spirit guide's going to connect to the client's energetic field. So we're not involved in that process at all. So all of this
And
is remote the way that we work, which kind
and
of
what kind of information would you need about the client
so
to
we
do that?
generally we only need that. I mean, when I used to work with Terry, he just used to give me a case number. So like case number 451 in his kind of log would be the name of because
Well,
this
would you need their name, their address?
just
Well,
their name, just their name probably. Because again, the spirit guides are going to find the energetic connection and connect to that person behind the scenes. So they don't really need anything particularly. And that when we did the work with Terry, he didn't even provide the sex. It was just case number 451. So we would connect to the person and then basically detail what we found. But we wouldn't know if it was a male or female or child or teenager. Like no information at all, basically. But
now,
you relying on the spirit guide to find the connection and connect to the right person.
now, do you have any problems uh, collecting for something like that? Because I could refer the guy to you, and you do the thing disappears, and he goes, "Well, it disappeared anyway. I'm not going to pay this guy."
We don't really know. Generally, most people are so happy that they're, in
I know
fact,
I ran into the same thing. I've only got one person that beat me in 4 years.
yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, most people, again, have lived in such a negative way that they're over the moon. They wake up feeling better, the mind's clear, they're energetic. Because again, these things are siphoning energy, so everyone feels ill and tired and fatigued all the time. So when they wake up and they feel like they're full of energy, they've got clarity of mind, the thought process is better, and the voices are gone. Generally, a lot of people have said to us, we'd pay you thousands of dollars if you
Hmm.
charge that. And
And there's somebody in oh, where are they? They do charge a whole hell of a lot more than that. It's another kind of thing that does these things, and she's backed up for months, 6 months she's backed up.
Yeah, right. I mean, that was the whole point of the way that we were trying to find this method to be fast, because Terry said, thousands of people need help. So if we're going to sit in a room with someone for an hour, there's a geographical limitation because, of course, you can't see the clients in different countries. And, of course, each one client per hour. But if the spirit guides are able to do the clearing very quickly, which they should be able to, then we should be able to do 10 clients an hour in theory, because we're not doing the work. The guides are doing the work. That's the key differential, really. So we're just the admin people, really, that write the report and send off the documented part of the session, but the actual work is happening not in our timeline, effectively.
Okay, so what I could tell him, I'm referring you to this guy. He'll be charging you 150, pay him if it works.
Yeah, or we'll just do it for, I would be happy to do it for free as a research project and say there is no charge, but you give us the feedback, basically,
Yeah,
which would be
yeah,
good.
we could do that.
Yeah,
They give him the feedback, but yeah, probably be better if we said if you did at least a voice recording or a video.
yeah, we could do that, actually. I mean, there's not a lot to see because obviously I'd be talking to Chen, so he'd be just telling me what he's found effectively. But we could,
Yeah,
yeah,
I don't know about that. Well, what you could do is have the client verify the results.
that's the key, really, is to get the feedback off the client to
Get the
say,
feedback off the client. Say, I've been hearing voices for 20 years. I've
yeah,
gone through this. And like I said, I'll be referring you MACE people that I've cleared.
yeah, brilliant.
And then say, okay, this guy will, uh, he'll see you for 150 bucks. He'll get rid of these things, or he'll see you for free if you'd be willing to do a video.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic, actually. I think the video would be more powerful than
It
the
would be
money,
more
really, from my
powerful.
perspective.
And some of them might be willing to do the video, but they wouldn't want to be seen because there's a stigma to this.
Yeah,
I
of
mean,
course. And
there's a big stigma.
that is the thing, really. I mean, obviously, we've got a few videos where we sort of blur people's faces
Yeah,
effectively.
yeah.
So just you can hear them speaking, but you can't quite see the face, which
Okay,
is the other
good.
way to do things.
That would work. So we give them a choice.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Either
Yeah,
pay if it works. If it doesn't work, you don't pay,
yeah,
or he'll do it for free if you give us a video.
yeah, that'd be perfect, Jerry, actually. Great.
All right, let's see what we can do.
That's quite exciting. Yeah, good. That'd be good.
And I think between us, we have the fix.
Yeah, I think it certainly looks that way from my perspective. Your mace work fixes the gap that we have, and hopefully our part of it fixes the gap that you guys have got.
We have, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So I know a client right now I could call that I just kind of ran out with and said, okay, I'm at the end here. I couldn't get this thing to leave. I'll refer her to you.
Yeah, fantastic. That'd be a good starting point, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, brilliant.
Well, good.
Cool. All right,
Well,
Jerry.
and
Thanks for your
I'll
time.
also see if I can't get you on this lady's in South Africa that runs the video.
Yeah,
So
fabulous.
I'll talk to her about you. Say I've talked to you. You'd be a good guest, and we'll see about bringing you on.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you for that, Jerry. Well, any exposure is good, obviously, from that perspective, really. So thank you for that.
You're more than welcome.
Cool.
Like I said, we got the two pieces. We just need to put them together.
Yeah, cool. We'll get some emails and things going. I'll probably loop in Lorna because obviously she's quite instrumental in this, this whole area as well, really. I'm sure she'd be interested. Well, she'll certainly be interested to watch this. So,
Yeah,
so once we've finished, I'll download the recording, process it, and pop you a copy, and then you can
yeah, good.
watch it, share it, do whatever you need to do, which will be good.
Okay, and send me a copy of that one where that you had
Yeah,
that one patient say, okay, they're gone.
yeah,
I'll
perfect.
put that on my website. So, kind of, hey, there is a way to deal with this.
Okay, perfect. That's my post-it.
Okay. Yeah, I got a
Oh,
bunch
desk
of
to
those over
post
here
it.
too. I got them all over the place here. They're surrounding me.
I know. Here it's like some sort of crazy. Well, Jane used to say, "You come up into your bedroom, it's like some crazy office because there's stuff everywhere." That's
Yeah, mine too. You look at you're looking at the neatest part of it, but I'm surrounded by piles of books and
yeah,
papers and
yeah. Well, it's how we work, isn't it? We're working with all the things around you that you need to work really and do this sort of thing. So that's good. Right, Joey, you take care. Have a good
okay,
rest of your day.
you too.
I'll
All
catch
right.
you soon.
Take care over there. Don't
Cheers,
don't
mate.
get killed in the riots.
I'll try not to.
All righty. Take care of yourself.
Bye, mate.
Bye bye.